Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel and welcome to this video. Today I will be showing you how I painted this old rusty kettle, and for that I will be using today Clairefontaine watercolor paper, 300 GSM or 140 pounds. It is cold press, 100% cotton, 24 by 30 centimeters or 9.5 by 12 inches. Also for the watercolors today we'll be using Sennelier watercolors, Ultramarine. I will be using some Pthalo blue. I will be using yellow ochre, rose umber, some Venetian red, burnt umber, ivory black. I will be using this Panart round brush number 8. Also, I will be using this smaller round number 2 brush by Panart, this no name detail brush, and a Raphael number 8 round brush, also mostly for some splattering. I will be using this Derwent tinted charcoal, white charcoal, for some highlights. And that's going to be everything. So without further ado, let's get started. I will start with painting the first wash to my kettle, and for that I will be using some Pthalo turquoise, ultramarine, and a little bit of the raw sienna to mix in a little bit muted blue. I do want it to look quite old and vintagey, so it's not going to be too vibrant. I'm starting off with painting the kettle, and some parts I will be painting a little bit darker, adding a little bit more pigment, some parts a little bit lighter. So where I think the shadows are going to be, I will add a bit more pigment, this time somewhat more saturated, and since the paint now is wet, it will bleed one to each other and just create beautiful textures and shadows. Now adding a little bit more of raw sienna here and there on my kettle, adding the first layer of rust and thyme to my kettle, mixing in a little bit of the Venetian red, adding a second layer. So my paper is still wet. I'm painting now wet on wet, and this time adding a little bit less than the first rusty layer with raw sienna. And now picked up some Van Dyke brown, and I'm gonna paint even darker. This one is quite saturated pigment. I did not water it down a lot. This is going to be the next layer of rust, again painting wet on wet, leaving it to bleed and just create nice edges, making it look rusty. So this time I've added a little bit more of the ivory black to my mix and painting even the darker parts. So now I will be adding a lot less of the darker pigment. I don't want to have too much of that dark, just some parts, the darkest, the most rusty parts. And with this detail brush I will add that dark mix just underneath the top of my kettle and then doing some splatters. I left it to dry fully, and now I'm adding a second layer. Again, same mix of colors that I did use earlier. I did not wet my paper. This time I'm painting wet on dry, and I'm using quite a lot of the pigment in my brush, not too much water. So just adding the details, and where I want to add a little bit more of the shadows and also a little bit more of that darker rusty parts. Since the paper is wet, is dry, actually it's not gonna bleed, edges are gonna stay sharper. So now that this dried, I mixed in a little bit of the ultramarine and some ivory black to paint in the top of the kettle and the darkest parts of my kettle, also adding a new rusty layer. Now I'm using yellow ochre, again adding a bit more of the rust, and since I was adding my splatters previously onto a wet paper, it's just blend together, and I do want to have those random splatters, adding a bit more touches to the rusty parts. With this charcoal, white charcoal, I'm now going to add some highlights, and it's nice because you can spread it. I'm adding it onto my paper and then just spread it with my hand, and it's visible just enough. You can use white gouache if you like, or white acrylic, but I like this because it's not too white. And when finished with my kettle, I'm just finishing off also my flowers, last touches, the details, and the entire painting in real time, including flowers and kettle, is available for my Patreon members. So there is a link in the description if you want to check out my Patreon. And thank you so much for joining me today. If you do like this video, please hit the like button, share it, and comment. If you haven't still, please do subscribe to my channel. I have many tutorials there for beginners and advanced painters. I'm sure you will find something for yourself. And again, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time. Bye!